Good evening, all, and welcome to Liminal Muse. And thank you for joining me once again to read Pollyanna. If you'd like to support me and the channel, there is a link to buy me a coffee and check out my handcrafted items for sale or commission. You can also follow me on Blue Sky or join me on Discord. So let's take a moment, first of all, to settle into this place of stories and dreams. Take a breath and ground yourself so that your imagination can soar. So, in our last reading, Pollyanna encountered a number of residents of the small town of Beldingsville. We met a cantankerous old miser, a bedridden woman of middle age who seems to delight in finding something to complain about, and young Jimmy Bean, a boy about Pollyanna's age from a nearby orphanage. The stage is set for the remarkable ways that our girl is about to change their lives forever. Chapter 12. Before the Ladies' Aid. Dinner came at noon in the Harrington homestead was a silent meal on the last day of the ladies' aid. Pollyanna was silent on the day of the ladies' aid meeting. Pollyanna, it is true, tried to talk, but she did not make a success of it, cheerfully because 4 times she was obliged to break off a glad in the middle of it, much to her blushing discomfort. The 5th time it happened, Miss Polly moved her head wearily. There, there, child. Say it if you want to, she sighed. I'm sure I'd rather you did not, if it's going to make all this fuss. Pollyanna's puckered little face cleared. Oh, thank you. I'm afraid it would be pretty hard not to say it. You see, I've played it so long. You demanded Aunt Polly. Well, played it. But the game, that father. Pollyanna stopped with a painful blush at finding herself so soon again on forbidden ground. Aunt Polly frowned and said nothing. The rest of the meal was a silent one. Pollyanna was not sorry to hear Aunt Polly tell the minister's wife over the telephone a little later that she would not be at the ladies' aid meeting that afternoon owing to a headache. When Aunt Polly went upstairs to her room and closed the door, Pollyanna tried to be sorry for the headache, but she could not help feeling glad that her aunt was not to be present that afternoon when she laid the case of Jimmy Bean before the ladies' aid. She could not forget that Aunt Polly had called Jimmy Bean a little beggar, and she did not want Aunt Polly to call him that before the ladies' aid. Pollyanna knew that the ladies' aid met at 2 o'clock in the chapel next to the church, not quite half a mile from home. She planned her going, therefore, so she should get there a little before 3. I want them all to be there, she said to herself, else the very one that wasn't there might be the one wanting to give Jimmy Bean a home. And of course 2 o'clock always means 3, rarely, to ladies' aiders. Quietly, but with confident courage, Pollyanna ascended the chapel steps, pushed open the door, and entered the vestibule. A soft babble of feminine chatter and laughter came from the main room. Hesitating only a brief moment, Pollyanna pushed open one of the inner doors. The chatter dropped to a surprised hush. Pollyanna advanced a little timidly. Now that the time had come, she felt unwontedly shy. After all, these half-strange, half-familiar faces about her were not her own dear ladies' aid. How do you do, ladies' aiders? She faltered politely. I'm Pollyanna with you. I reckon some of you know me, maybe. Anyway, I do know you, only I don't know you altogether this way. The silence could almost be felt now. Some of the ladies did know this rather extraordinary niece of their fellow member, and nearly all had heard of her, but not one of them could think of anything to say just then. I've come to lay the case before you, stammered Pollyanna after a moment, unconsciously falling into her father's familiar phraseology. There was a slight rustle. Did your aunt send you, my dear? asked Mrs. Ford, the minister's wife. Pollyanna colored a little. Oh no. I came all by myself. You see, I'm used to ladies' aiders. It was ladies' aiders that brought me up with father. Somebody tittered hysterically, and the minister's wife frowned. Yes, dear. What is it? Well, it's Jimmy Bean, sighed Pollyanna. He hasn't gotten a home except the orphan one, and they're full and don't want him anyhow, he thinks. So he wants another. He wants one of the common kind that has a mother instead of a matron in it. Folks, that'll care. He's 10 years old, going on 11. I thought some of you might like him. Oh, to live with you. Well, did you ever? Murmured a voice, breaking the day's pause that followed Pollyanna's words. With anxious eyes, Pollyanna swept the circle of faces about her. Oh, I forgot to say, he will work, she supplemented eagerly. Still, there was silence. Then, coldly, one or two women began to question her. After a time, they all had the story and began to talk amongst themselves, animatedly, not quite pleasantly. Pollyanna listened with growing anxiety. Some of what was said, she could not understand. She did gather, after a time, however, that there was no woman there who had a home to give him, though every woman seemed to think that some of the others might take him, as there were several who had no little boys of their own homes. But there was no one who agreed herself to take him. Then she heard the minister's wife suggest timidly that they, as a society, might perhaps assume his support and education instead of sending quite so much money this year to the little boys in faraway India. Well, a great many ladies then, and several of them talked all at once, and even more loudly, more unpleasantly than before. It seemed that their society was famous for its offering to Hindu missions, and several said that they should die of mortification if it should be less this year. Some of what was said at this time, Pollyanna again thought she could not have understood, too, for it sounded almost as if they did not care at all what the money did, so long as the sum opposite the name of their society in a certain report headed the list. And of course that could not be what they meant at all. But it was all very confusing and not quite pleasant, so that Pollyanna was glad indeed when at last she found herself outside in the hushed, sweet air, only she was very sorry, too, for she knew it was not going to be easy, or anything but sad, to tell Jimmy Bean tomorrow that the Ladies' Aid had decided that they would rather send all their money to bring up the little India boys than to save out enough to bring up one little boy in their own town, for which they would not get a bit of credit in the report, according to the tall lady who wore spectacles. But that it's good, of course, to send money to the heathen, and I shouldn't want him not to send some there, sighed Pollyanna to herself as she trod sorrowfully along. But they acted as if little boys here weren't any account, while little boys ways off. I should think, though, they'd rather see Jimmy Bean grow than just a report. Chapter 13. In Pendleton Woods. Pollyanna had not turned her steps toward home when she left chapel. It had been a hard day, for all had been a vacation one, as she had termed the infrequent days when there was no sewing or cooking lesson. And Pollyanna was sure that nothing would do her quite so much good as a walk through the green quiet of the Pendleton Woods. Up Pendleton Hill, therefore, she climbed steadily in spite of the warm sun on her back. I don't have to get home till 5:30 anyway, she was telling herself. And it'll be so much nicer to go around by the way of the woods, even if I do have to climb to get there. It was very beautiful in the Pendleton Woods, as Pollyanna knew by experience, but today it seemed even more delightful than ever. notwithstanding her disappointment over what she must tell Jimmy Bean tomorrow. I wish they were all up here, all those ladies who talk so loud, sighed Pollyanna to herself, raising her eyes to the patches of vivid blue between the sunlit green of the treetops. Anyhow, if they're up here, I just reckon they change, and take Jimmy Bean for the little boy, all right? She finished, secure in her conviction, but unable to give a reason for it even to herself. Suddenly, Pollyanna lifted her head and listened. A dog had barked some distance ahead. A moment later, he came dashing toward her, still barking. Hello, doggy, hello! Pollyanna snapped her fingers at the dog and looked down the path. She had seen the dog once before, she was sure. He had been then with the man, Mr. John Pendleton. She was looking now, hoping to see him. For some minutes she watched eagerly, but he did not appear. Then her attention towards the dog. The dog, as even Pollyanna could see, was acting strangely. He was still barking, giving little short, sharp yelps as if of alarm. He was running back and forth, too, in the path ahead. Soon they reached a side path, and down this the little dog fairly flew, only to come back at once, whining and barking. Oh, well, that isn't the way home, laughed Pollyanna, still keeping to the main path. The little dog seemed frantic now. Back and forth, between Pollyanna and the side path he vibrated, barking and whining pitifully. Every quiver of his little brown body and every glance from his beseeching brown eyes were eloquent with appeal, so eloquent that at last Pollyanna understood, turned, and followed him. Straight ahead now, the little dog dashed madly, and it was not long before Pollyanna came upon the reason for it all. A man lying motionless at the foot of a steep, overhanging mass of rock a few yards from the side path. A twig cracked sharply under Pollyanna's foot, and the man turned. With a cry of dismay, Pollyanna ran to his side. Mr. Pendleton! Oh, are you hurt? Hurt? No. Oh, no. I'm just taking a siesta in the sunshine, snapped the man irritably. Say, how much do you know? What can you do? Have you got any sense? Pollyanna had caught her breath with a little gasp, but, as was when she answered the questions, literally, one by one. Why, Mr. Pendleton, I don't know so very much, and I can't do a great many things. But most of the ladies' aiders, except Mrs. Rawson, said I had a real good sense. I heard him say so one day. I didn't know I heard them. The man smiled grimly. There, child. Beg your pardon, I'm sure. It's only this confounded leg of mine. Now, listen. He paused, and with some difficulty reached his hand into his trouser pocket and brought out a bunch of keys, singling out one between his thumb and forefinger. Straight through the path there. About 5 minutes' walk from my house. This key will admit you to the side door out of the porte-cochere. Do you know what I'm going to be sure I'm saying this word right. Porte-cochere is? Oh, yes, sir. My auntie has one with a sun parlor over it. That's the roof I slept on, only I didn't sleep, you know. They found me. Yeah? When you get into the house, go straight through the vestibule and I'll hall into the door at the end. On this big flat-top desk in the middle of the room, you'll find a telephone. Do you know how to use a telephone? Oh, yes, sir. Well, once with Aunt Polly. Never mind Aunt Polly now, cut the man scowlingly as he tried to move himself a little. Hunt up Dr. Thomas Chilton's number. On the card, you'll find somewhere around there. Well, it ought to be on the hook down at the side, but it probably won't be. You know a telephone card, I suppose, when you see one. Oh, yes, sir. I just love Aunt Polly's. There's such a lot of queer names. Tell Dr. Chilton that John Pendleton is at the foot of Little Eagle Ledge in the Pendleton Woods with a broken leg, and to come at once with a stretcher and 2 men. He'll know what to do besides that. Tell him to come by the path from the house. A broken leg? Oh, Mr. Pendleton, how perfectly awful, shuddered Pollyanna. But I'm so glad I came. Can I do it? Yes, you can. But evidently you won't. Will you go and do what I ask and stop talking? Moaned the man faintly. And with a little sobbing cry, Pollyanna wept. Pollyanna did not stop now to look up at the patches of blue between the sunlit tops of the trees. She kept her eyes on the ground to make sure no twig nor stone tripped her hurrying feet. It was not long before she came in sight of the house. She had seen it before, though never so near as this. She was almost frightened now at the massiveness of the great pile of gray stone, with the pillared verandas and its imposing entrance. Pausing only a moment, however, she sped across the big neglected lawn and around the house to the side door under the porte-cochere. Her fingers, stiff from the tight clutch upon the keys, were anything but skillful in their efforts to turn the bolt in the lock. But at last the heavy, carved door swung slowly back on its hinges. Pollyanna caught her breath. In spite of her feeling of haste, she paused for a moment and looked fearfully through the vestibule to the wide, somber hall beyond, her thoughts in a whirl. This was John Pendleton's house. The house of mystery. The house into which no one but its master entered. The house which sheltered, somewhere, a skeleton. Yet she, Pollyanna, was expected to enter alone these fearsome rooms and telephone the doctor that the master of the house lay now. With a little cry, Pollyanna, looking neither to the right nor the left, fairly ran through the hall to the door at the end and opened it. The room was large and somber, with dark woods and hangings like the hall. But through the west window, the sun threw a long shaft of gold across the floor, gleamed dully on the tarnished brass and andirons in the fireplace, and touched the nickel of the telephone on the great desk in the middle of the room. It was towards this desk that Pollyanna hurriedly tiptoed. The telephone card was not in its hook. It was on the floor. But Pollyanna found it and ran her shaking forefinger down through the C's to Chilton. In due time she had Dr. Chilton himself at the other end of the wires and was tremblingly delivering her message, answering the doctor's terse, pertinent questions. This done, she hung up the receiver and drew a long breath of relief. Only a brief glance did Pollyanna give about her. Then, with a confused vision in her eyes of crimson draperies, book-lined walls, a littered floor, an untidy desk, innumerable closed doors, any one of which might conceal a skeleton, and everywhere dust, 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 she fled back through the hall to the great carved door, still half open as she had left it. In what seemed, even to the injured man, an incredibly short time, Pollyanna was back in the woods at the man's side. "Well, what is the trouble? Could you get in?" he demanded. Pollyanna opened wide her eyes. "What? Of course I could. I'm here," she answered. "As if I'd be here if I hadn't gone in. And the doctor will be right up just as soon as possible to mend things. He said he knew just where you were, so I didn't stay to show him. I wanted to be with you." "Did you?" smiled the man grimly. "Well, can't say I admire your taste. I should think you might find pleasanter companions." "You mean because you're so cross?" "Thanks for your frankness. Yes," Pollyanna laughed softly. "But you're only cross on the outside. You aren't cross inside a bit." "Indeed, how do you know that?" asked the man, trying to change the position of his head without moving the rest of his body. "Oh, lots of ways. There, like that. The way you act with a dog," she added, pointing to the long, slender hand that rested on the dog's sleek head near him. "Well, it's funny how dogs and cats know the insides of folks better than other folks do, isn't it? Say, I'm going to hold your head," she finished abruptly. The man winced several times and groaned once softly while the change was being made. But in the end, he found Pollyanna's lap a very welcome substitute for the rocky hollow in which his head had lain before. "Well, that is better," he murmured faintly. He did not speak again for some time. Pollyanna, watching his face, wondered if he was asleep. She did not think he was. He looked as if his lips were tight shut to keep back moans of pain. Pollyanna herself almost cried aloud as she looked at his great strong body lying there so helpless. One hand, with fingers tightly clenched, lay outflung, motionless. The other, limply open, lay on the dog's head. The dog, his wistful, eager eyes on his master's face, was motionless too. Minute by minute, The time passed. The sun dropped lower in the west, and the shadows grew deeper under the trees. Pollyanna sat so still she hardly seemed to breathe. A bird alighted fearlessly within reach of her hand, and a squirrel whisked its bushy tail on a tree branch almost under her nose, yet with his bright little eyes all the while on the motionless dog. At last the dog pricked up its ears and whined softly. Then he gave a short, sharp bark. The next moment Pollyanna heard voices, and very soon their owners appeared, 3 men carrying a stretcher and various other articles. The tallest of the party, a smooth-shaven, kind-eyed man whom Pollyanna knew by sight as Dr. Chilton, advanced cheerily. "Well, my little lady, playing nurse?" "Oh, no, sir," smiled Pollyanna. "I've only held his head. I haven't given him a mite of medicine. But I'm glad I was here." "So am I," nodded the doctor as he turned his absorbed attention to the injured man. Chapter 14. Just a Matter of Jeff. Pollyanna was a little late for supper on the night of the accident to John Pendleton, but, as it happened, she escaped without reproof. Nancy met her at the door. "Well, if I ain't glad to be setting my 2 eyes on you," she said in obvious relief. "It's 6:30. "I know it," admitted Pollyanna anxiously, "but I'm not to blame. Truly, I'm not. And I don't think even Aunt Polly will say I am either." "She won't have a chance," retorted Nancy with huge satisfaction. "She's gone." "Gone?" gasped Pollyanna. "You don't mean that I've driven her away?" Through Pollyanna's mind at that moment trooped remorseful memories of the morning with its unwanted boy, cat, and dog, and his unwelcome, glad, and forbidden father that would spring to forgetful little tongue. "Oh, I didn't drive her away." "Well, not much you did," scoffed Nancy. "Her cousin died suddenly down in Boston, and she had her go. She had one of them yeller telegram letters, after went away this afternoon, and she won't be back for 3 days. Now, I guess we're glad, all right. We'll be keeping house together. Just you and me all that time. We will, we will." Pollyanna looked shocked. "Glad? Oh, Nancy, when it's a funeral?" "Oh, but it wasn't a funeral I was glad for, Miss Pollyanna. It was—" Nancy stopped abruptly. A shrewd twinkle came to her eyes. "What, Miss Pollyanna, as if you wasn't yourself that was teaching me to play the game," she reproached her gravely. Pollyanna puckered her forehead in a troubled frown. "Well, I can't help it, Nancy," she argued with a shake of her head. "It must be that there are some things I didn't right to play the game on, and I'm sure funerals is one of them. There's nothing in a funeral to be glad about." Nancy chuckled. "Well, be glad 'tain't ourn," she observed demurely. But Pollyanna did not hear. She had begun to tell of the accident, and in a moment Nancy, open-mouthed, was listening. At the appointed place the next afternoon, Pollyanna met Jimmy Bean according to agreement. As was to be expected, of course. Jimmy showed keen disappointment that the lady's aide preferred a little Indian boy to himself. "Well, maybe 'tis natural," he sighed. "'Course, things you don't know about are always nicer than things you do. Same as the potato on the other side of the plate's always the biggest. But I wish I looked at waiter somebody way off. Wouldn't it be just great now if only somebody over maybe one me?" Pollyanna clapped her hands. "Why, of course. Why, that's the very thing, Jimmy. I'll write to my ladies' aiders about you. They aren't over in India, they're only out west, but it's awful far away just the same. I reckon you'd think so if you come all the way here just as I did." Jimmy's face brightened. Do you think they would truly take me?" he asked. Well, of course they would. Don't they take little boys in India to bring up? Well, they can just play you are the little India boy this time. I reckon you're far enough away to make a report, all right? You wait, I'll write him. All right, Mrs. White. No, all right, Mrs. Jones. Mrs. White got the most money, but Mrs. Jones gives the most, which is kind of funny, isn't it, when you think of it? But I reckon some of the ladies will take you. All right, but don't forget to say I'll work for my board and keep, put in Jimmy. I ain't no beggar in business, even when the ladies' age, I'm thinking. He hesitated and nodded. And I suppose I better stay where I be for a spell, yet, till you hear. Well, of course, nodded Pollyanna emphatically. Then I'll know just where to find you. And they'll take you, I'm sure you're far enough away. Didn't Aunt Polly say? She broke off suddenly. Do you suppose I was Aunt Polly's little girl from India? Well, if you ain't the queerest kid, grinned Jimmy as he turned away. It was about a week after the accident in Pendleton Woods that Pollyanna said to her aunt one morning, Aunt Polly, please, would you mind very much if I took Mrs. Snow's cat-foot jelly this week to someone else? I'm sure Mrs. Snow wouldn't. This once. Dear me, what are you up to now? Sighed her aunt. You are the most extraordinary child. Pollyanna frowned a little anxiously. Aunt Polly, please, what is extraordinary? If you're extraordinary, you can't be ordinary, can you? Well, you certainly cannot. Oh, that's all right then. I'm glad I'm extraordinary, sighed Pollyanna, her face flaring. You see, Mrs. White used to say Mrs. Rawson was a very ordinary woman, and she disliked Mrs. Rawson something awful. They were always in fight. I mean, Father had, well, that is, we had more trouble keeping peace between them than we did between any of the rest of the Aiders, corrected Pollyanna, a little breathless from her efforts to steer between the Cecilia of her father's past commands in regards to speaking of church quarrels and the charredness of her aunt's present commands in regards to speaking of her father. Yes, well, never mind, interposed Aunt Polly a trifle impatiently. You do run on so, Pollyanna, and no matter what we're talking about, you always bring up those ladies' aiders. Yes'm, smiled Pollyanna cheerfully. Well, I reckon I do, maybe. But you see, they used to bring me up, and that will do, Pollyanna interrupted the cold voice. Now, what is it about this jelly? Well, nothing, Aunt Polly, truly. That you would mind, I'm sure. You let me take this jelly to her, so I thought you would to him this once. You see, broken legs aren't like lifelong invalids, so his won't last forever as Mrs. Snow does, and she can have all the rest of the things after just once or twice. Him, broken leg. What are you talking about, Pollyanna? Pollyanna stared. Then her face relaxed. Oh, I forgot. I reckon you didn't know. You see, it happened while you were gone. It was the very day you went that I found him in the woods, and I had to unlock his house and tell for the men and the doctor and hold his head and everything, and of course I came away and I haven't seen him since. But when Nancy made the jelly for Mrs. Snow this week, I thought of how nice it would be if I could take it to him instead of her just this once. And Polly, may I? Yes, I suppose so, acquiesced Miss Polly a little wearily. Who did you say he was? Well, the man. Well, I mean, Mr. John Pendleton. Miss Polly almost sprang up from her chair. John Pendleton? Yes, Nancy told me his name. Maybe you know him. Miss Polly did not answer this. Instead, she asked, Did you know him? Pollyanna nodded. Oh, yes, he always speaks and smiles now. He's only cross outside, you know. I'll go get the jelly. Nancy had most fixed when I came in, finished Pollyanna, already halfway across the room. Pollyanna, wait! Miss Polly's voice was suddenly very stern. I've changed my mind. I would prefer that Mrs. Snow had that jelly today, as usual. That is all. You may go now. Pollyanna's face fell. Oh, but Aunt Polly, hers will last. She can always be sick and have things, you know, but his is just a broken legs, and legs don't last. Broken ones. He's had it a whole week now. Yes, I remember. I heard Mr. John Pendleton had met with an accident, said Miss Polly a little stiffly. But I do not care to be sending jelly to John Pendleton, Pollyanna. Well, I know he is cross. Outside, admitted Pollyanna sadly. So I suppose you don't like him. But I wouldn't say 'twas you who sent it. I say 'twas me. I like him. I'd be glad to send him jelly. Miss Polly began to shake her head again. Then suddenly she stopped and asked in a curiously quiet voice, "Does he know who you are, Pollyanna?" The little girl sighed. "Well, reckon not. I told him my name once, but he never calls me it. Never." "Does he know where you live?" "Well, no. Well, I never told him that." "Then he doesn't know that you're my niece." "Well, I don't think so." For a moment there was silence. Miss Polly was looking at Pollyanna with eyes that did not quite seem to see her at all. The little girl was shifting impatiently from one small foot to the other, sighed audibly. Then Miss Polly roused herself with a start. "Very well, Pollyanna," she said at last, still in that queer voice so unlike her own. You may take the jelly to Mr. Pendleton as your own gift, but understand do not send it. Be very sure that he does not think I do." "Yes, no. Oh, thank you, Aunt Polly," exulted Pollyanna as she flew through the door. Chapter 15. Dr. Chilton. The great gray pile of masonry looked very different to Pollyanna when she made her second visit to the house of Mr. John Pendleton. Windows were open. An elderly woman was hanging out clothes in the backyard, and the doctor's gig stood under the porte cochere. As before, Pollyanna went to the side door. This time she rang the bell. Her fingers were not stiff today from the tight clutch on a bunch of keys. A familiar-looking small dog bounded up the steps to greet her, but there was a slight delay before the woman who had been hanging out the clothes opened the door. "If you please. Brought some calf's foot jelly for Mr. Pendleton," smiled Pollyanna. "Well, thank you," said the woman, reaching for the bowl in the little girl's hand. "Who shall I say sent it? And it's calf's foot jelly." The doctor, coming to the hall at that moment, heard the woman's words and saw the disappointed look on Pollyanna's face. He stepped quickly forward. "Ha! Some calf's foot jelly," he asked genially. "That will be fine. Maybe you'd like to see our patient, eh?" "Oh, yes, sir," beamed Pollyanna, and the woman, in obedience to a nod from the doctor, led the way down the hall at once, though plainly with vast surprise on her face. Behind the doctor, a young man, a trained nurse from the nearest city, gave a disturbed exclamation. "But, doctor, didn't Mr. Pendleton give orders not to admit anyone?" "Oh, yes," nodded the doctor imperturbably, "but I'm giving the orders now. I'll take the risk." Then he added whimsically, "You don't know, of course, but that little girl is better than a 6-quart bottle of tonic any day. If anything or anybody can take the grouch out of Pendleton this afternoon, she can. And that's why I sent her in." "Who's she?" For one brief moment the doctor hesitated. "Well, she's the niece of one of our best-known residents. Her name is Pollyanna Whittier. I don't happen to enjoy a very extensive personal acquaintance with the little lady as yet, but lots of my patients do, I'm thankful to say." The nurse smiled. "Indeed. And what are the special ingredients of this wonder-working tonic of hers?" The doctor shook his head. "I don't know. As near as I can find out, it is an overwhelming, unquenchable gladness for everything that has happened or is going to happen. At any rate, her quaint speeches are constantly being repeated to me. And as near as I can make out, just being glad is tenor of most of them. All is," he added, with another whimsical smile, as he stepped out onto the porch, "I wish I could prescribe her and buy her as I would a box of pills. Though if there gets to be many of her in the world, you and I might as well go to ribbon selling and ditch digging for all the money we'd get out of nursing and doctoring." He laughed, picking up the reins and stepping into the gig. Pollyanna, meanwhile, in accordance with the doctor's orders, was being escorted to John Pendleton's rooms. Her way led through the great library at the end of the hall, and, rapid as was her progress through it, Pollyanna saw at once that great changes had taken place. The book-lined walls and the crimson curtains were the same, but there was no litter on the floor, no untidiness on the desk, and not so much as a grain of dust in sight. The telephone card hung in its proper place, and the brass andirons had been polished. One of the mysterious doors was open, and it was towards this that the maid led the way. A moment later, Polly found herself in a sumptuously furnished bedroom, while the maid was saying in a frightened voice, "If you please, sir, here's a little girl with some jelly. The doctor said I was to bring her in." The next moment Pollyanna found herself alone with a very cross-looking man lying flat on his back in bed. "See here, didn't I say—" began an angry voice. "Oh, it's you." It broke off not very graciously as Pollyanna advanced towards the bed. "Yes, sir," smiled Pollyanna. "Oh, I'm so glad they let me in. You see, at first the lady most took my jelly, and I was so afraid I wasn't going to see you at all. Then the doctor came and he said I might. Wasn't he lovely to let me see you?" In spite of himself, the man's lips twitched into a smile, but all he said was, "Hmm." "And I brought you some jelly," resumed Pollyanna. "Calf's foot. I hope you like it." There was a rising inflection in her voice. "Never ate it." The fleeting smile had gone, and the scowl had come back to the man's face. For a brief instant, Pollyanna's countenance showed disappointment, but it cleared as she set the bowl of jelly down. "Well, didn't you? Well, if you didn't, then you can't know you don't like it anyhow, can you? So I'm glad you haven't after all. Now, if you knew—" "Yes, yes. Well, there's one thing I know, right? And that is that I'm flat on my back right here this minute, and that I'm liable to stay here till doomsday, I guess." Pollyanna looked shocked. "Oh, no. Couldn't be till doomsday, you know, when the angel Gabriel blows the trumpet. Unless it should come quicker than we think it will. Oh, of course, I know that's what the Bible says. It may come quicker than we think, but I don't think it will. That is, of course, I believe the Bible, but I mean, I don't think it will come as much quicker as it would if it should come now." And John Pendleton laughed suddenly and aloud. The nurse, coming in at that very moment, heard the laugh and beat a hurried but very silent retreat. He had the air of a frightened cook who, seeing the danger of a breath of cold air striking a half-done cake, hastily shuts the oven door. "Aren't you getting a little mixed?" asked John Pendleton, Pollyanna. The little girl laughed. "Well, maybe. But what I mean is that legs don't last. Broken ones, you know. Like lifelong invalids some as Miss Snow's got. So yours won't last till doomsday at all. Well, I should think you should be glad of that." "Oh, I am," retorted the man grimly. "And you didn't bring but one. You can be glad it wasn't new." Pollyanna was her task. "Of course, so fortunate," sniffed the man with uplifted eyebrows. "Looking at it from that standpoint, I suppose I might be glad I wasn't a centipede and didn't break 50. Pollyanna chuckled. "Oh, that's the best one yet," she crowed. "I know what a centipede is. They've got lots of legs. And you can be glad—" "Ah, of course," interrupted the man sharply, all the old bitterness coming back to the voice. "I can be glad, too, for all the rest, I suppose. The nurse and the doctor and that confounded woman in the kitchen." "Why, yes, sir. I think how bad it would be if you didn't have him." "Eh?" he demanded sharply. "Why, I say, only think how bad it would be if you didn't have him, and you lying here like this." "As if that wasn't the very thing that was at the bottom of this whole matter," retorted the man testily. "Because I am lying here like this. And yet you expect me to say I'm glad because a fool woman who disarranged the whole house and calls it regulating, and the man who aids and abets her in it and calls it nursing, and to say nothing of the doctor who eggs them both on, and a whole bunch of them, meanwhile, expecting me to pay them for it, and pay them well, too." Pollyanna frowned sympathetically. "Well, yes and no. That part's too bad about the money. When you've been saving it, too, all this time." "When, huh?" "Well, saving it. Buying beans and fish balls, you know. Say, do you like beans? Or do you like turkey better, only on account of the 60 cents? "Look out here, child. What are you talking about?" Pollyanna smiled radiantly. "Well, about your money, you know. Denying yourself and saving it for the heathen. You see, I found out about it. Why, Mr. Pendleton, that's one of the ways I knew you were cross inside. Nancy told me. The man's jaw dropped. Nancy told you I was saving money for the... Well, may I inquire who Nancy is? Why, Nancy? She works for Aunt Polly. Aunt Polly? Well, who's Aunt Polly? Well, she's Miss Polly Harrington. I live with her. The man made a sudden movement. Miss Polly Harrington, he breathed. You live with her. Well, yes. Well, I'm her niece. She's taken me to bring up on account of my mother, you know. Faltered Pollyanna in a low voice. She was her sister. And after Father went to be with her and the rest of us in heaven, there wasn't anyone left for me down here but a lady's aid, so she took me. The man did not answer. His face, as he lay back on the pillow now, was very white, so white that Pollyanna was frightened. She rose uncertainly to her feet. Well, I reckon maybe I'd better go now, she proposed. I hope you like the jelly. The man turned his head suddenly and opened his eyes. There was a curious longing in the dark depths, which even Pollyanna saw, and at which she marveled. And so you are Miss Polly Harrington's niece, he said gently. Well, yes, sir. Still, the man's dark eyes lingered on her face until Pollyanna, feeling vaguely restless, murmured, I suppose you know her. John Pendleton's lips curved in an odd smile. Oh, yes. Oh, I know her. He hesitated, then went on with a still curious smile. But you can't mean that it was Miss Polly Harrington who sent that jelly to me, he said slowly. Pollyanna looked distressed. No, sir, she didn't. She said, I must be very sure not to let you think that she did send it, but I thought as much, vouchsafed the man shortly, turning away his head, and Pollyanna, still more distressed, tiptoed from the room. Under the porte cochere, she found the doctor waiting in his gig. The nurse stood on the steps. Well, Miss Pollyanna, may I have the pleasure of seeing you home? Asked the doctor smilingly. I started to drive on a few minutes ago, then it occurred to me to wait for you. Well, thank you, sir. I'm glad you did. I just love to ride, beamed Pollyanna as he reached out his hand to help her in. Do you? Smiled the doctor, nodding his head in farewell to the young man on the steps. Well, near as I can judge, there are a good many things you love to do, eh? He added, as they drove briskly away. Pollyanna laughed. Why, I don't know. I reckon perhaps there are, she admitted. I do like most everything that's living. Of course, I don't like the other things very well, sewing and reading aloud and all that, but they aren't living. No, what are they then? Well, Aunt Polly says they're learning to live, sighed Pollyanna with a rueful smile. The doctor smiled now a little queerly. Does she? Well, I should think she might say just that. Well, yes, responded Pollyanna, but I don't see it that way at all. I don't think you have to learn how to live. Well, I didn't anyhow. The doctor drew a long sigh. After all, I'm afraid some of us do have to, little girl, he said. Then for a time he was silent. Pollyanna, stealing a glance at his face, felt vaguely sorry for him. He looked so sad. She wished, uneasily, that she could do something. It was this, perhaps, that caused her to say in a timid voice, well, Dr. Jilton, I should think being a doctor would be the very gladdest kind of business there was. The doctor turned in surprise. Gladdest? When I see so much suffering always everywhere I go, he cried. She nodded. I know, but you're helping it, don't you see? And of course you're glad to help it, and so that makes you the gladdest of any of us all the time. The doctor's eyes filled with sudden hot tears. The doctor's life was a singularly lonely one. He had no wife and no home save his 2-room office in a boarding house. This profession was very dear to him. Looking now into Pollyanna's shining eyes, he felt as if a loving hand had been suddenly laid on his head in blessing. He knew, too, that never again would a long day's work or a long night's weariness be quite without that newfound exaltation that had come to him through Pollyanna's eyes. God bless you, little girl, he said unsteadily. Then, with a bright smile his patients knew and loved so well, he added, "And I'm thinking, after all, that it was the doctor, quite as much as his patient, that needed a draught of that tonic." All of which puzzled Pollyanna very much, until a chipmunk running across the road drove the whole matter from her mind. The doctor left Pollyanna at her own door, smiled at Nancy, who was sweeping off the front porch, then drove rapidly away. "I've had a perfectly beautiful ride with the doctor," announced Pollyanna, bouncing up the steps. "He's lovely, Nancy." "Is he?" "Yes. And I told him I should think that his business would be the very gladdest one there was." "What?" "Going to see sick folks, and folk what ain't sick but think they is, which is worse." Nancy's face showed open skepticism. Pollyanna laughed gleefully. "Yes, that's most what he said, too. But there is a way to be glad even then. Yes." Nancy frowned in meditation. Nancy was getting so she could play this game of being glad quite successfully, she thought. She rather enjoyed studying out Pollyanna's posers, too, as she called some of the little girl's questions. "Oh, I know," she chuckled. "It's just the opposite of what you told Miss Snow." "Opposite?" repeated Pollyanna, obviously puzzled. "Well, yes. You told her she could be glad because other folk wouldn't like her, all sick, you know." "Yes," nodded Pollyanna. "Well, the doctor couldn't be glad because he didn't like other folks, the sick ones, I mean, what he doctors," finished Nancy in triumph. It was Pollyanna's turn to frown. Well, yes," she admitted. "Of course, that is one way, but it isn't quite the way I said. And somehow, I don't seem to quite like the sound of it. It isn't actually as if he said he was glad they were sick, but you do play the game so funny sometimes, Nancy," she sighed as she went into the house. Pollyanna found her aunt in the sitting room. "Who was that man? The one who drove into the yard, Pollyanna?" questioned the lady a little sharply. "What? Why, Polly, that was Dr. Chilton. Don't you know him?" "Dr. Chilton? What was he doing here?" "Well, he drove me home. Oh, and I gave the jelly to Mr. Pendleton, but Miss Polly lifted her head quickly. "Pollyanna, he did not think I sent it." "Oh, no, Aunt Polly, I told him he didn't." Miss Polly grew a sudden vivid pink. "You told him I didn't!" Pollyanna opened wide her eyes at the men's remonstrative dismay in her aunt's voice. "Well, Aunt Polly, you said to." Aunt Polly sighed. "I said, Pollyanna, that I did not send it, and for you to be very sure that he did not think I did. But it's a very different matter from telling him outright that I did not send it." And she turned vexedly away. "Dear me. Well, I don't see what the difference is," sighed Pollyanna as she went to hang up her hat on the one particular hook in the house upon which Aunt Polly had said it must be hung. All right. That's all we have time for tonight. Thanks so much for joining me. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this story or anything really. Feel free to comment, like, and subscribe, and check out the links below. Have a wonderful night, and I'll see you in the next one.